Okay, so what is the difference in training for a half marathon and training for a marathon? Both are very similar and training is very similar, but there are slight differences which can really help you whether you're focusing on the half marathon or the marathon. For the marathon, unless you're running under 2 hours, which for 99.999% of us, we're running more than that, glycogen and where you're getting your fuel from is going to come into it. So fat metabolism is going to come into it. So you got to train your body, you got to train your stomach along the training to be able to take in carbohydrates, because you're going to need those carbohydrates from the beginning, but later on in the race especially, so that you don't bonk, so that it doesn't become difficult. And this is what you hear the regular person or the regular runner in the first marathons get wrong. They get wrong the nutrition, and therefore they've not got the fuel in order to, the fat is not going to be enough to get them to the finish line to go further than 2 hours, and therefore they bonk and hit the wall. In a half marathon, there's less chance of that happening, but it can still happen. It depends on how long you're going to be out there for. You still need to eat the right breakfast. You still need to eat the right foods before you start a half marathon or a marathon. You still want to do it optimally. You still want to be able to be energized throughout the race, and you still want to fuel the half marathon throughout. So if you're going to be running for longer than an hour, which again 99.999% of us are running for longer than an hour in a half marathon, you still want to be taking a gel or sports drink along the way. But the way the training slightly changes is that for a half marathon, if you're training for a half marathon, and if you decided, I'm still chewing a bit this morning because of my brace, but if you're training for a half marathon, you can put less emphasis. You still need to do the long run. You still need to build your stamina, because your stamina, your endurance from that weekend long run will factor really nicely into the interval training midweek. It will factor really nicely into giving you strength for the speed work. And certainly it's going to help your race. It's going to help you race 21k, 30 miles, but you don't need to put as much emphasis on that as you do for the marathon. The marathon, you need to be gradually building up over the weeks, get fit, as I've said, and then for 10, 12 weeks, do a specific marathon training plan where you gradually build that long run up until you're out there for the amount of time that you're going to be out, that you expect to be out there in the marathon. That doesn't mean that you're going to be running your marathon pace for 3-4 hours, however long you're trying to be out there for. It means that, for example, if you're trying to run 8-minute miles, it doesn't mean that you have to be out there for 8-minute miles times 26. It means that you have to be out. It means that you go sort of 10-20% slower, and then you're out there. But you're out there for the amount of time that's going to take you. I can't do the math, but I'm guessing it's sort of around about 3:30 for the marathon. Yeah, so you can focus much more on speed and speed endurance for the half marathon, because it's likely to be more of a little bit more on the limit, not as much as the 5k or the 10k for the half marathon. You're a little bit more on the limit, but you can focus on speed during that long run. Long run doesn't need to go any longer than 25k, although it will help you. It will help you if you go a little bit further, and if you go towards 30k, then that's just going to make that 21k seems so much more raceable, and so much more that you can concentrate on your pace rather than just trying to survive and get to the finish. Exactly the same in a marathon. If you can be out there at least for the marathon distance, and I like to be out there for 50k, not just 42, then you're gonna be able to race for the entire distance. And for the interval sessions, you can, for a half marathon, you can focus much more on the shorter distances, much more on the speed, and for longer. So as I say, start with short intervals, 250 meters or 1 minute intervals. Give yourself 60 seconds in between, rest in between, so that you can focus on quality. You can focus on building that speed, building your body's ability to move over the ground, the biomechanics, And then as you move up in distance or up in time that you're running hard for, that seems easier, and you're able to kind of move forward, and gradually over the weeks you should be able to sort of move the amount of time that you're running hard for in an interval, but almost keep the pace. There's obviously a difference if you're running 1 minute intervals and then you're running 10-minute intervals 5 weeks later. It's not going to be that you're going to be able to just hold that pace, or you shouldn't be able to. Anyway, you should be able to run hard enough in that minute so that it's not easy to replicate that if you're running for 10 minutes. But what I would do is start with 1 minute intervals, then gradually move to 1 minute 30 intervals. So it would be something like 12 times 1 minute, then 15 times 1 minute, then 20 times 1 minute, then 10 times a minute and a half, 15 times a minute and a half, then 2 minute intervals, then 3 minute intervals, and gradually have the overall total volume of the time that you're out there working hard. Get that to a point where if you're doing 20 times 1 minute, that's obviously 20 minutes of hard work. Get that to a point where you're I like to be towards the hour mark. So 5 times 10 minutes would be my ultimate session before a marathon. 10 times 5 minutes, another great session, and variations of that. So you do the maths and kind of like 50 minutes or 60 minutes divided by 7-minute intervals or 8-minute intervals, and work it out that way. But with half marathon running, you can recruit a lot more fast twitch muscle fibers earlier on in the training. So for the first 2, 3, 4 weeks, you can be doing those short intervals, that minute and a half intervals, so that you're building a much faster body, a much faster system, so that you're able to go quicker in the half marathon. And in terms of time, your half marathon time doubled shouldn't be too much different from your marathon time. If you can do a 10K, it's very, very similar to what you can kind of hold on to the half marathon, a little bit slower. And then to be able to run essentially 2 half marathons back to back in the same time as what you want your marathon time to be, hope that makes sense. It's all about training. It's all about working on your endurance, working on your long run and your stamina to the point that you can hold that half marathon time for the full marathon. And what you're capable of running for 5K, you probably can't, unless you're kind of like really at the sharp end and you're an elite athlete and you're running 15 minutes and even at 15 minutes for 5K. So if you're running 14 minutes for 5K and that's like super elite time, then it's not going to be possible to continue that kind of pace all the way through. But what we're seeing now is, for instance, I think Eliud Kipchoge's personal best for the 5K, it's something around about 13:20, 13:30. So not super fast, but elite, without a doubt, elite. His times during the world record marathon were just around about 14 minutes or just over 14 minutes. So that time that he's able to kind of keep that kind of just 30 to 45 seconds slower per 5 kilometer segment is not such a big difference to what he can run flat out and given that's a long time ago that he's done those times at the 5K, but it's exactly the same for you and easier if you're running slow. So if you're running, for instance, 20 or 30 minutes for 5K, it's a lot easier just to train the body to be able to double that and do 10K in exactly the same time, to be able to get to 21K and do a half marathon in exactly the same time, and then to do a marathon. Just training on that lactate threshold, which we've covered in other videos, and then your stamina, your speed endurance, and your endurance to be able to go long and be able to stay on the feet. And then you can race a half marathon and you can race a marathon. Just that simple.